right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks to BSN for hosting this. I've been able to be on a couple of them in the past and really enjoyed them, especially in the youth space, because it's not always super easy to find a lot of information about what other schools are doing and how people are working with the age group that I'm currently working with. So kind of want to run down what we're doing and how we got started here, and then hopefully have some good conversation towards the end. So our mascot's the Dolphins. So the Dolphin Long-Term Athletic Development Framework and Pathway is what we'll kind of go through today. So the number one goal, let's see, the number one goal of our program ultimately is to graduate healthy and fit young people. Any athletic kind of accomplishments that come out of this, I'll say, is a byproduct of the overall mission. The vast majority of the students I work with won't compete at the next level, and an even smaller percentage will continue to compete after that. So we want to lay a foundation for a lifelong habit of physical activity and exercise, so they can be really excellent at anything that they choose to do, because it's our belief that you'll be better at anything you do if you're physically fit and healthy. So as you can see, I won't go through every statistic there, but there's a lot of information about what physically fit and healthy kids are able to do as opposed to less active kids. So this is another slide indicating the same sort of results from physical activity in childhood. So the number one thing there that really stood out to me, I'm sure 8% earning potential, more earning potential when you're a fit or active child. So I think that has a lot of indications of goal setting, working backwards from a goal to find your ways to get there, believing in a process, keeping the long view in mind, all these things that are really important when you're trying to build a career. And I think the weight room in particular can be a vehicle for teaching those sort of things. I work at a pre-K through 12 private school, so all of our families are making a choice to invest in their children's education, expecting a long-term return, not only on their college admissions, their test scores, but also their lifelong ability to perform and be prepared for a lifelong of success. So I think that this is really telling, these statistics on the screen right now, more so than maybe the one before, about why it's important for our schools and private facilities and government structures to invest in youth physical education, strength conditioning, athletic performance, because ultimately when sports are long behind us, our children are still benefiting from these massive qualities that build a better society. So that's a screen that I think is really powerful behind the why, what I do every day, why I do what we do, but then even more so why our communities should invest in programs like ours. This is some feedback I actually got from students at the beginning of the school year. So we have a program here. It's a nationwide program called the National Honor Society. So students of a certain age have to be selected based on their grades and a handful of other applications, teacher recommendations, and so on. And when they're admitted, they have to write a letter to a teacher that they feel like facilitated them to get recognized. I was really blown away to be able to receive a handful of those this past school year. And I'm not necessarily a traditional classroom teacher, so for me to receive something like that, like I said, it surprised me. And these were some of the excerpts from those. So obviously, while we're talking, you guys can kind of scan those, and it really speaks to some of these were written by Division I baseball players. Some of them are written by state champions. Some of them are written by kids that have no interest in sports whatsoever. Some are written by valedictorian, people that have really high test scores and grades, and then some others that felt isolated and alone and a low self confidence. And these were some excerpts from those letters that talked about the impact of what we do in their life. And sometimes you don't know the impact until it's written down and someone gives it to you. So I think it's so important for all of us to share feedback with each other, because sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And these things are really, really powerful, both for me as a coach to hear, but also for our community to kind of understand the broader sense of lifting weights and running, and what it can do for our students. So these were powerful, and I think are a great testament. So a lot of words on this slide, and no intention to read all that right now. I did try to underline stuff to make it some stuff stand out. This is the National Strength Conditioning Association's 10 pillars for long-term athletic development. A handful of years ago, they came out with a position statement, and these were the 10 foundational principles of long-term athletic development, and how a physical education, they call it cradle to grave, should check all 10 of these boxes, no matter where you stand on that continuum. So if you kind of go through the underlined highlighted sections, there's a non-linear direction of growth. We grow in different directions. So we have to take into account that growth and development is non-linear. Both physical and psychological well-being of the people we're training has to be taken into account at all times. So it's not a win at all cost sort of environment. The primary focus should be on motor skills and muscular strength. I think that's a really big indication, all right, that what we're doing shouldn't be simply to make people tired, but muscular strength and motor skill should be the primary focus of a long-term athletic development model. A sampling approach to sport. So they're able to try a lot of different sports in a safe, welcoming, open environment. I say safe not as in a potential to get injured, but safe as in they feel comfortable trying something they're not good at. So that's an approach that's really, really important for our students to be able to select what they might like. And I'll go into how we facilitate that. Ensure the ongoing participation. So we do not want to limit or stunt the growth of our athletes from a development standpoint because we stop their participation at a certain age. We'll dive into a little bit more the idea of early matures and late matures. And if we cut a late maturing student, they might turn into physically the person we need for a state championship, but we cut them in the 6th grade. And that would be limiting participation. Obviously, you can see that cradle to grave, how it's important for us to facilitate participation along all age ranges. Range of training modes, expose them to a lot of different things. We try to take our students off campus. We try to get them involved in a lot of different physical activities beyond sports performance, so that maybe they fall into a lifelong love of hiking or bike riding or yoga or tennis or golf or all the different lifestyle sports that you can play until your elderly ages. And we try to expose that to them through multiple training modes, along with weightlifting and sprint training. And we have students that fall in love with that. And then kind of the last underline is a systematic progress of training. I think that it's really important. The same, I always tell our families that come on tours, we bring students along in physical development the same way we do in math and reading and science and anything else. We wouldn't put a 3rd grader in a calculus class and not the other way around. And so it's got to be systematic. It's got to be vertically aligned through each grade level. And it's also got to be horizontally aligned, so we know that each class is getting the same exposure. So as they come up, it's the exact same they would in their academic courses. So that's kind of a quick rundown of their 10 pillars, but this is a list that we come back to when we're making programming decisions, when we're making curriculum decisions. When I say programming, it's not the way a strength coach might think of sets and reps, but more, do we want to create a 6th grade hiking club? Does that check one of these boxes? And if it checks one of these boxes, then we can proceed down. But I think this is a really good North Star to be able to come back to and say, okay, how many of these things are we accomplishing? And if we're not accomplishing them, how can we move closer to them? Okay, so kind of keeping in mind what we had just talked about, those 10 pillars, hopefully you all will see some trends of how we've applied those throughout. So we have a pre-K 3, so we have young as 3-year-olds on campus, all the way till senior year of high school, so roughly 18, all on one campus. So it's a really unique model. We have about 1,000 students pre-K through 12th grade, a little over 1,000. We've actually grown quite a bit the last few years. So roughly a little over 1,000 students, pre-K through 12, and no football. So I think that's important to kind of give a scope of what we're dealing with. So if you look at our lower, middle school, upper school schedule, kind of what we offer each level. So we have physical education every day in our lower school or our elementary school. It sounds maybe obvious, but not every school district offers physical education on a daily basis in school. So all of our students grade pre-K through 5 have physical education every day, and we're able to lay a foundation as far as curriculum goes in those sections. You kind of see what our foundation is in those courses. Physical literacy, build that through games. It's a lot of fun. We have a great staff of PE teachers, and their gift is taking foundational movements and making it into a game. I always compare box jumps and lily pad hops. A third grader might want to jump from lily pad to lily pad and play a game that way, but my high schoolers want to do box jumps, and it's more or less the same thing, but they have a gift of turning them into games. Middle school, I think a huge strength we have in our middle school program is that we have a no-cut athletic program in our middle school. So it's selection based. So we have like an A, B, C team kind of structure based on demand. And if you want to play a sport, you will have a jersey. It just depends on where you go. So that helps us. Obviously, it requires some staffing to be able to coach all those teams, but it allows kids to develop at their own rate and have a free, easy selection to say, I'll try this, and maybe they fall in love with it. You'll see in 6th and 7th grade, we have age-appropriate, vertically aligned physical education offerings that transitions from cooperative games to more sets, reps, exercises as they progress through the middle school structure. I instruct every 8th grader. So during the school day, I teach an 8th grade course. They cycle through that throughout the year. So they have a touch point with me in our weight room, in our training facility every year. And those students will either be in our level 1, 2 program, which we'll get into. And then upper school, kind of my bread and butter, where I spend most of my time. You can see what we offer as far as times of the day. We have a during the school day elective course that our more advanced students can get into. And then consistent in-season training with all of our teams. One note would be the only team-specific lifts we do is in season. Everything else is a mixed group, which I think helps us as a community because everybody's striving for something hard together and maybe developing friendships together. And maybe the cool kid on the best team is encouraging a kid that doesn't have a lot of friends, and it really brings the environment together as a community. So kind of looking at our 3-level programming. So this is that multi-level programming that we talked about in the intro. It also touches on the vertical alignment that's necessary to progress students properly. So in level 1, okay, so this would be students that just graduate the 7th grade they would all come into the level 1 program. It's circuit based. So we're doing that for capacity reasons, but then also to keep them busy because I'm sure anybody that coaches kids around that age will realize if you say 3 sets of 10, you'll have a kid come back and say, I just did 30. I'm done now. What's next? So the idea of doing some reps and then resting and doing some reps isn't going to work for a 7th, 8th, 9th, probably even 10th grader. They're going to want to move. So the circuit helps that. It exposes them to a lot in a short period of time, works on their movement capacity. And we do a lot of high volume with those kids for 2 main reasons. Number 1, it's a lot of practice. If I only could shoot 5 free throws a day, all right, probably wouldn't be enough to get better at them. So if I'm doing 5 reps of an exercise, my take is from a movement pattern standpoint, that's just simply not enough practice. And then also it builds hypertrophy, which we know is the base. All right, hypertrophy, strength, power. Hypertrophy has to be the base of it. And as they're going through growth-related changes with hormones, hopefully some high volume will spur some hormone release and kind of jumpstart their progression when it comes about naturally. So level 2, the big difference there is we integrate some percentage-based strength training, and then I introduce them to our modified APRE 5-3-1 sets and rep progression. They have sets, they have reps, they use our team builder software. We have rack mounted iPads. So the students input all their reps and weights into the iPad. So they're tracking everything they do. the circuits get condensed down into supersets or maybe 3 exercise circuits. And the reps go from more of a strength phase. In our accessory lifts, we'll still mess around in the 12s in early cycles. But we are our primaries, our squat, front squat, bench press, trap bar. We transition from between 8 to 3, depending on the time of the year. And then level 3, our highest level training program, our newest training program. When I first got here, everybody was on level 2 because I could control it. It met everybody kind of where they were at. It gave the more elite kids some strength stuff. It gave the more novice kids some basic stuff, and it was sort of in the middle, as you can see. And then as we went, we needed to do an intro program. So I created level 1, and then some kids were I felt they were strong enough. They didn't need to get any stronger. So we need to integrate some power explosive training. That's what the level 3 program was created for. Contrast training, Olympic lift variations, velocity-based training. We don't have any velocity-based technology, but we do follow the sets and the percentages, the reps and percentages, and it's worked pretty well for us. And then we work from reps. We do our 8s, we do our 5s, and then we work down to singles when it comes to doing contrast stuff later in the year. But like I said, I think this past school year, out of 300 students, we had 15 or 20 on level 3. So it's a pretty select group. And we'll talk about how we progress to that level. Okay, so the level-to-level assessments. So in places I've been previously, we would do a lot of assessing once a year, and then we never look at it again. And I felt like that wasn't a super productive use of our time. I've also found that when I run people through a movement screen prior to an exercise program, their first set of their first exercise typically tells me what the screen told me. So my point of all that is we are assessing through the program. We are assessing through the exercises. So if a student struggles with a body weight squat, and we start with goblet squats. So start with a 5-pound dumbbell on a goblet squat. And if I notice a student is struggling with the 5-pound dumbbell, then individually I can take that person and modify them and say, okay, from here on out, you're doing this. And obviously injuries is kind of a separate category, but we don't assess students in kind of the clinical traditional way because of a time, resources. And I think that we get a lot of our assessment daily through our exercises. Now we're training and testing, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So in our level 1 program, for a student to go from level 1 to level 2, all right, you can see there on the screen, they have to do 5 perfect push-ups. Okay, and from day 1, we go over what I feel of is a perfect push-up, and students have to be able to perform 5 perfect push-ups to not move on from that. Honestly, the biggest issue we see is people poking their head down. They can do it, core, strength, everything's fine, but they kind of have an optical illusion that they think they're going lower because their eyeballs are, but their body's not. And as soon as we fix the head, they're smooth sailing with the push-ups. So push-ups, a lot of people can deal with and progress from there. The goblet squat, we chose 70 pounds for 5 reps. Now, as I mentioned before, when I created these programs, we didn't have an assessment when I first got here. We all had more or less the same program, and there weren't these levels to it. So I developed these parameters based on what I saw. Who was a level 2 person? Who was a level 1 person? Took a lot of averages to kind of build a character to say, okay, this person is a typical level 1. This is a level 2. So we didn't really pick 70 pounds just out of the sky. We front squat everybody that trains here, and we can get into that later, but that's why we go goblet, and a barbell with a 10 on each side is 65. And I need our students to be able to handle that and more when they go to front squatting. So that's kind of where we chose 70. And I also find 70 is where it gets kind of a pain to get it up there. So students have to be able to deal with all that. And we go through what a perfect goblet squat looks like, and the kids train. Now, here's number 3, probably the most challenging one, especially because every 8th grader gets in this program. I have to be able to trust you. I have to be able to turn my back and walk and coach a level 1 student that doesn't know what a dumbbell is. I have to go over there and coach that kid while you're doing what you're supposed to be doing behind me. Level 1s get all the majority of my attention and focus from a safety standpoint because they don't know what the heck's going on. So I have to make sure that they're safe. So I have to be able to trust a level 1 kid that they can do what they're supposed to. And I've had a good number of kids that crush the push-ups and crush the squat on day 1. They're ready to go. And I'm like, buddy, I cannot trust you at all. So you've got to stay over here until I know you're on it. And the great thing about the level program is everybody wants to level up. It's like a video game. So as soon as I say, buddy, I just don't trust you enough, they're on it because they want to be at that next level. So then to go from level 2 to level 3, these numbers here were the average projected 1 rep max. That's the P1RM, projected 1 rep max of our level 3 athletes when we created the level 3 program. Okay, so they had a 180 bench, a 250 front squat, 385 trap bar deadlift, 28.7-inch vert, and then our pound for pound is a team builder resource that takes their bench, squat, and deadlift, divides it by their body weight, and turns it into a decimal force so that we have a number based on their weight, so that you can get a category if you're really, really lean, if you're a small kid, you can still check a box even if your strength numbers aren't there. So let's say you're pound for pound there. Normally those kids, their vertical is there because they're pretty light, right? And then you can maybe have, let's say, 1 strength exercise, and that puts you in there. So it doesn't eliminate our smaller body weight students. And they, like I said, they need 3 of those 5 categories. And I think it keeps it pretty selective. And again, a good time to note that we don't have football. So we don't, I think, our strongest bench in school history is 290 pounds. And I've only been at the school for, next year will be my 4th school year. And we did not have a strength program before that. So it's all brand new. But some of these numbers look pretty low when you're dealing with 300-pound students, but we just don't have those kids walking around. So that's kind of how we assess and progress our students. I think one thing that's important to note here is that you can live at level 1 for the rest of your life and be really strong, really fit, perform well, and enjoy your workouts. I personally, in my own training, I do level 2 exercises with level 1 sets and reps. So you can kind of mix and match this thing to kind of make it work for each individual. And I have some students that are level 1 that have no interest in level 2. And I have even more students in level 2 that say, man, all that Olympic lifting, contrast training, box jump, sprint stuff, that's not for me. I just want to lift. Well, then stay in level 2 and you'll be great. So it's more of a continuum. Next time I give this presentation, I'm going to add arrows with arrows going both ways, because you really can slide back and forth. I mean, I'm taking some level 3s and moving them down to level 1 to start our summer program because they play 3 sports and haven't been with me in a while. So it is very, very fluid in nature. So that's kind of my version of assessment and progression. I think kind of touching on our in-season program. So I think it makes us really unique that every Tuesday, Thursday, I see every in-season team. It's our only time we train as a team. Our biggest strength from this by far is that it gets kids in the weight room in a mandatory situation with their friends and their coaches, and then it hooks them to become an off-season, year-round athlete. Because what they do in the off-season dictates what I can do in the in-season. Our best teams on campus train hard all summer, and then I can progress them appropriately during the school year. But if you're not around in the summertime, right, or in the off-season, and you show up in the in-season, I mean, it's hard to facilitate a lot of changes because they're competing twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever it might be. So these are my templates. You guys can read them there. I have an exercise menu, and then I select from the menu into the template. So a double leg knee dominant exercise would be like a goblet squat. Now, there's tons of exercises in that template, and based on the sport and the time of year and the individual, we can kind of work our way through each one of these exercises. And then we can add supersets to them, which I always do for the sake of the flow of the room. And they can be corrective exercises, mobility, I mean, depending on the sport and the time of year. And then my sets and reps range from reps around 8 to 1. I still believe in building a base in the beginning of the in season because we want to win the championship. So we're not super worried about the first game of the year, the first week of the year. So if we're a little bit sore, I think that's for the better, because we're trying to kind of put hay in the barn for when it matters most. Come ring chasing time. And then we transition into more heavy stuff towards the end of the year. You don't get sore when you lift heavy. There's less volume, less tearing on the system. And the kids get less fatigued because it's only sets of 1. So there's not as much fatigue there. And we add that in with a French contrast where we'll do heavy. So it's a heavy lift, a body weight lift, a light lift, probably less than 15%, and then an assisted lift, which has had really great results. I started doing that when I was at Virginia Commonwealth with their track and field throwers. And gosh, man, kids, we do that with our basketball team. Then they go out and do layup lines because we do pregame lifts a lot. We'll do a French contrast circuit pregame, and we've got kids that can't touch the rim dunking layup lines. It's really, really exciting. When they put the whole year together and we cap it off with the French contrast, it's worked really, really well. So like I said, all that mumbo jumbo, the biggest strength is you get kids in the room that might not come on their own, and then they might come in the off season, and then it builds from there. Okay, last slide, and then we're going to go to some Q&A, I think, if my timing is right. So this was the number one principle pillar of the NSCA long-term athletic development model. Long-term athletic development pathways should accommodate for a highly individualized, non-linear nature of growth and development. And if you guys are basketball people, Nikola Jokic just won the NBA championship, back-to-back MVP, okay? And this is a picture of him probably when I would be working with him here at my school, okay? And if he was written off, all right, and in a lot of our kind of systems of sport development here in the States, he might have been written off at an age that would have capped his basketball life, right? He would have been out of shape, unathletic, and the worst player on his 6th grade team, cut in the 7th grade, and then done with. Okay, so I think it's really, really important to keep stories like this in the front of mind when you have kids walk into your door, all right? And like I said, the athletic accomplishment's the gravy, okay? If you can take a kid that's a little bit overweight, a little bit unconfident, and provide them confidence, that's going to have ripple effects throughout their entire life. But even if we look at it just from an athletic standpoint, we still can't write people off. Because if we do our job appropriately and are patient with them, there might be a development coming that we can't predict. And there's a lot that goes into the age and growth maturation research. European soccer programs have been doing deep research in this forever, obviously, because they invest in 9-year-olds, so they need to know where they're going. So we don't get as deep as they do here, but we do continue the path, and we do not end someone's development based on what they're expressing as a 9, 10, 12, 13-year-old. So that's kind of the rundown on what we do, kind of a quick look at it. I know we're going to do some questions and answers, but my email is there. My Instagram is what I'm most active on. That's there. And then I have a newsletter that I try to do monthly about different topics, and hopefully send out some programming, some videos through that. So if you're interested in any of that, that's kind of the best way.